Steve had received, thanks to Penn State Industries going to the symposium up in Raleigh last week, they are offering discounts to turning clubs. So we are going to sign up for that. We already have a nice discount at Hartfield Tool and a small one from Craft Supplies for abrasives. So, but that's nice. I'm sure you're all familiar with Penn State. Lots of supplies, lots of odds and ends, trucks, tools, you name it. Quite a variety of products, and I bought all my dust collection stuff from them, which had we had the discount would have been substantial. So that'll be a nice one to add to our list. So we'll send a reminder out to everybody else that's not here. That's all on my fairly short list. Does anybody have anything that they would like to announce? Board members, guests, anybody have anything they want to say before we turn it over to Frank? No? Awfully quiet bunch tonight. Okay. Take it away, Frank.
Okay. All right. You know, this might be July, right? But look at this. Are we doing all right? We must be. And first of all, go and see some first-time people here. And look at this. Nice work with. And, of course, most of these are now going to go for the food bank. Although, boy, this is kind of special. I think you ought to save that one. Anyway, these are good. And there's a stone turning here. Who did this? Nobody? Well, okay, then that's mine. I'll put it in my pocket. Now, the tallest item here is, of course, a stool. And what's so interesting about this is it's Norfolk pine. Turn that over. And he laminated the legs, so there's lamination in there. And he added collars inside just to give it more strength to the legs. So I think that's really kind of neat.
Whose piece?
This guy over there, the guy with the gray hair. Huh? What? Oh yeah? Was that fun to do? Was it?
It was a pour from here.
A little messy, wasn't it?
No, well, everything is static cling. It didn't go all over the garage like I thought it was going to.
Well,
Right there, it's a residence floor.
I think that's
Wait a few
neat.
minutes, you'll see some fly a little bit.
Now, Joe Cheney has branched out here. This is a very nice piece, and look at the way he fitted the legs in to make the stand. It's really very good. And it's now it's a mystery piece because there's no way to get into it. You know, it's a solid piece. But I think that's really neat. And also this is a Norfolk Island pine piece that Joe did. Now, once again, I don't have to mention who did this. I mean, the finishes are just superb. Look at that, just perfect. And now, was this done with this new stuff or with the?
Yeah, that's that Interlux polyurethane. It's a marine finish.
And now do you?
I like. It's twice as expensive as the Midwax high gloss,
Right.
and it brushes a lot harder, and I don't think it levels quite.
Okay, so we don't recommend it.
So far, I
Okay.
don't think too much of it, but I can't tell any difference.
Okay, and what's interesting, take a close look at this because the piece is exquisitely done, beautiful, but there are some problems here with discoloration, and you got to watch out for that. And invariably, that's caused by turning the piece when it isn't fully dry. So, you know, you got to be careful because if the cut is just a little deeper in one spot than another, and then you put any finish on top of it, the finish is going to absorb differently and you'll never sand it out. So, and of course now it's so thin there isn't enough room to sand that anyway. But that's a beautiful piece. And there's more Great, good job. A little thick on the bottom, beautiful. Now, we, mentioned these, this is some of Steve's coring, and Norm has been busy, and are these all yours, Norm, or is that your buddy too? Huh?
Steve's coring and Mike,
Yeah, okay, so it's a collaboration, we call that, right? But the Norfolk pine just turned so beautifully, and the coloring, look at all the colors you get out of it, and it's just worthwhile. And for you to come up with a size bowl like that, you go to a craft show, and that'll be a talk about. You can say, oh, this is a baby baptismal font, that's what it is, right? So you can really get some use out of that. Very delicate pieces here with, this is Hercules War Club, and it really does show up very well. I would not have remembered the Latin name for it, but here it is, Corycia speciosa. Yeah, that would be my second guess. and and this is nice. Now again, this is ebonized cherry.
Yeah, that's ebonized.
Okay.
India ink.
Hmm? India ink. Yeah.
John, where did you get this wood?
If I told you, that'd kill you.
Okay, it's not worth it.
Now, as you can see, let's mention this. New student, first piece, and this is the wood that I can't remember the name of. Starts with a B. Come on. It's one growing in my yard.
Bottle brush?
Huh?
Bottle brush? Bottle brush.
No.
No, it's like Pocahontas.
No. It's sort of an evergreen, but not really. Dan, new student. And this is the first piece, and we got a convert. His wife likes it. We're in.
And what kind of wood was this?
Yeah.
Carrot wood.
Carrot wood. And of course, the ring tree, Dave, is busy making rings. And boy, you got one for everybody in the family, Dave? Huh?
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. That's so nice. And I think the day that we made those was very successful, and everybody came out with something that you'll always remember. Now we have a guest here, Bruce Woody, so I grabbed one of his pens. He is, of course, the expert pen turner. And if you're interested, by the way, the Lutz Club is having a day, when is it? Saturday? Huh? 27th. So you can see Dave here if you're interested in doing an all-day deal on making pens. Okay, look at this. We have here a skateboard rink. Isn't that wonderful? And all we need is one of the little mice to go on here. But that's really nice, David. I especially like the way you turned this, and you left enough mass in it so that it's not going to be tippy. Now, this, of course, is Russ's, and you'll never see another one like this because he managed to cut the rings to an 1/8 inch, and you know he's not going to be able to do that again. So once again, it proves if you tune the bandsaw, you can do it right. And of course, this gives a much more dramatic look. And what do you got for the rim?
Bacote.
Of course. And what else? What else did I miss? Oh, nice little pieces here. More. Nice fit. And look at that. Smaller one. Oh boy. You know, you got to look at these things and admire the flow of the grain in the wood and the coloring and how it all blends together. Now, did I miss something important here? Speak up. No? Okay. Then I'll give it back to you. Go do something good.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. I'll get over to the demo table. One little housekeeping item from Advantage Lumber. Dave? Yeah. Oh, if we have sell 6 more tickets, we'll have a drawing tonight. So dig deep. It's only $5, and then we can have the drawing at the end of the meeting.
One other thing, Dave want to say something about what he's got to fulfill?
He said there were no particular announcements. As always, Advantage has a number of sale items out here in the various stacks. He did ask me to make you aware of a new finish that they're handling. It's called Monocoat. The company is Rubio, and he's given me a small bottle, and he wants to, they're using it on their tables. It's a matte finish, but there's no reason you couldn't buff it. So he gave me a little bottle, and he asked me to put it on a bowl and then see what I could do with it. So I will report back to you. But they have quite a selection, and you can see that board there. You can get it in 30 or 40 different colors. So if you're interested, see Dave in the back. And I'll report back to you on how it does. He has several pieces back in their finishing room that have this coating on it, so you can take a look at them back there before you buy it. I guess that's it, and I'll get going with my demo. I'll put the microphone on so I don't have to hold it.
This working? Yep, it's working. Put this in the pocket back there. Okay, great that over here.
Okay, are we live here? Sounds it.
Very directional.
How's that? Am I coming through? Am I there? Can you hear me? Now can you hear me? Barely. Okay, this is kind of a continuation of what we were talking about back in April when they did a big pouring here with and made one of their river tables. And I got started and showed some of the pieces that I had done. So we're just gonna, and they gave me some epoxy, and they're really encouraging us to use it in our turnings in whatever way we can. You don't have to make solid pieces out of epoxy. You can use it as a kind of an embellishing aid, whether it's filling voids or using it in the way I do some of these. So definitely we're encouraging you to give it a try and bring stuff in. Tom, I know you've done a few pieces. So this is some of the stuff that I've been working on. All right, we got it open to this. I'm going to jump ahead. This is sort of a little sidebar, I guess you'd call it, if I were writing a piece. My grandson, who is 13, came to me a few weeks ago and asked if I would help him with a school project. And he's never done a woodworking project with me, so I jumped at the chance and said, that's great. And he wanted to make this is a community project, community service, so he wanted to make a table for his school library. Wonderful. And he came up with the idea of doing a table in the shape of the state of Vermont. And then he wrote me a couple days later and said, could we make it out of resin? So this is kind of the design that I came up with, and he loved it. We haven't decided what we're going to do for legs. So this table we're going to start working on the third week of August, and I will give you a report back. Hopefully, we'll get it done in a couple of weeks. He knows that I'm on a deadline to come back down here, so that's my little sidebar, and I've got it all set up with Dave to get the resin shipped back to Vermont, so we can do that. So it'll be similar to what they do here, except that we're going to have the shape of the state of Vermont here. This will all be maple, of course, being our state tree. Back to the subject. There are three basic types of resin, and probably 100 variations. Polyester, which is mostly what boat builders use, it really stinks like hell. Don't use it in your shop if you don't have good ventilation. Generally, for the kinds of things that we do, I think pen turners use a polyester type. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with doing pens. But limited use for thicker things that we might be interested in doing. Urethane, you may have, if you've done any lurking around the internet and looked particularly YouTube at resin turning, you may have seen this. This is a brand name, Alumilite. It's a urethane, and they are marketing to wood turners, and I've used some, and it's a good product. But when I discovered the epoxy that they have here at Advantage, I really switched, and I'm using all epoxy now. A huge advantage. You do have to use a pressure pot for the Alumilite, or bubbles are going to be a problem. And when I get over to one of my pieces, I'll show you exactly what happens if you don't. The epoxy that they have here at Advantage, the reason I like it, there are several reasons. One is it's a very slow set time. It's 24 to 36 hours before you can really handle it, and they recommend 72 hours before you turn it. I cheated on that a little bit this week. But the nice thing about a slow set time is that the bubbles have a chance to come to the surface, and it's usually not a problem. So I'm a believer in epoxy for, I think most of my future projects will be epoxy. Lots of different ways to utilize it. One of my very early ones, this was not some of Advantage's epoxy, and you'll see some flaws in it, but I saw a piece like this on the internet 2 or 3 years ago and had to try it. I did have some trouble. This was Alumilite, I think. I have some bubbles here. I'm not sure what caused them. Anyway, this was my very first attempt at making an epoxy bowl, which, considering it really wasn't all that bad, but I've learned a lot since then. I suggest if you want to make an epoxy bowl, you not try to bond it to wood at first. Make a solid one. This was one I did for the April meeting, and I just poured it in a mold, put a little rim on it. What I used for the coloring was, many of you were in our peppermill classes, and we had those beautiful Spectraply blanks, and I told you all to save your shavings, and this is a great use for them. I made another one this week. I cast one. I haven't turned it yet, but that's what gives it the additional color in here. A bowl like this is fairly simple to make. You'll learn right away there's right ways and wrong ways to hold your tool when you're doing the turning on epoxy. If you hold it the right way, you get beautiful, long, wispy curls. They'll fly all over the room, and they're full of static electricity. They stick to everything, including your face mask. If you don't have your tool in the right position, you make little tiny chips, and that's very easy to do also. In terms of molding something like this, easy way to do it is just go to the dollar store and get some cheap bowls. You put one bowl inside the other, put a piece of wood across so this stays above the bottom, so you get a thickness of resin on the bottom, and then you want to put a little weight in it so it doesn't float up. Very simple way. Another way, I made this one out of another bowl, and I made a core out of just scrap wood. This was just a piece of 2x8. So you're only pouring around the perimeter. I put a tenon on it, when I put this on the lathe, it'll be similar to this one. I'll turn a flat spot on the bottom, put a waste block on, and then I'll have a way to grab it on the bottom, and I'll be able to turn the inside and the outside. Another very simple way to get started. And the way you measure the amount of epoxy you need for this is with something that you probably have in a cupboard at home, just a bag of rice. And what you do is you pour it into the void of the mold that you've built, and then you pour the rice into a bowl, put a line on the bowl, and that tells you how much resin you're going to need. Add a little bit, because you've got some air pockets in here. But it's a pretty accurate way of measuring for the amount of epoxy that you're going to use. Always make a little extra, so and keep some molds around. And I have a bunch of these in my shop. I haven't turned them. They'll either be bottle stoppers or just some small item, paperweights, whatever, some small balls like this. So that way you're not wasting the epoxy. You always have a use for it. You definitely don't want to throw it away. Let's see. Okay, my first ball that I ever made, this was a couple years ago. This was the one I was speaking about earlier. This was not epoxy. This is the urethane. It was a aluminite. I did not know that you really need to coat the wood before you put the piece of wood into the mold. And the effect actually was kind of interesting. It looks like snow-capped mountains. It wasn't what I was shooting for. I wanted to expose the burl. So the way you deal with that is you put a coating. This is also a product that they have here at Advantage. It's a very quick setting coating, and you just put this all over it, and then it seals all the pores of the wood, so you do not get interaction between the epoxy and anything going on in the wood. Even though you think your block of wood is dry, there are going to be fibers, there's going to be material in there that will not mix well, and you'll end up with bubbles forming. So that's the way to take care of that. Once I learned about this stuff, I haven't had any more trouble with air bubbles. Definitely a good product. As far as burl, you can buy it in a number of places on the internet. But you don't even really, it doesn't even really have to be burl. It can just be a piece of wood that's got some nice grain. And we've all got pieces like this kicking around the shop. We never throw anything away. And so here's a good use for, excuse me, using it in a project like a ball like this. This bowl, I think I brought in to a show and tell a while ago. This was a case of just making a cut on my wave cutting jig on the bandsaw, removing this is rosewood, taking the piece of rosewood out, making an identical piece to fit in here. This all was turned and polished, excuse me, before I put the bowl back together, because it is a wave bowl. You cannot do anything on this once the bowl is reassembled. You can work on this part and on this part, but you have to do all the polishing with this first. You can go ahead and do the inside after you've reassembled the bowl. This one I did a couple years ago. It won a prize up in Tampa, and my concern with it was that epoxy is totally inert. It is not going to move a thousandth of an inch. This being rosewood, and of course it has grain, and any wood is going to expand or contract seasonally a little bit. Excuse me. I can't remember what I used on this for a finish. It was nothing special, but I put on a lot of coats, and I was hoping that it would stabilize the rosewood. This bowl has been around for 1.5 years, and as far as I can see, there have been no broken glue joints, which surprised me. I really expected some movement. I used CA glue to join the 3 pieces, and I got this on good old Amazon. It's a gel, it's a little tiny tube, and each time you use it, you use that tube and throw it away. But the gel is nice because when you apply it, it doesn't run all over the place. So you can very carefully put a bead of glue on both of your joints, press it together, make sure it's well aligned, and in 15 minutes you've got a bowl that's ready to go ahead and turn. So it's a quick setting, but the gel makes it very much more user-friendly. This one I think I had in April is just a case of, I made this on a sled on my table saw. This is a piece of resin that I got here. I got the materials here at Advantage. Dave gave me some little sparkly things. You don't see it real well. You actually see it better from, you can see them in there. And the nice thing about these materials that they've got here, they've got all different colors. So you can tint the epoxy, you can put in different colored sparkles, and definitely if you're not familiar with these tables, go in and look at the ones in their finishing room in there and some of the ones on display. The varieties of color and different special effects are fabulous. You can create almost anything you want. This was another one I did just recently, and it's just a plain piece of epoxy with a little bit of green tinting in it. I did nothing to this surface. This is the surface that I had on the casting. I did turn the back a little bit just to make it so it's flat. But that's how smooth it'll be after it sets up. So if you're careful, you can present your finished surface. You can do your finished surface right at the beginning, and there's nothing more to do. This is called multi-axis turning, for those of you who are not familiar with it. And I think we'll maybe have a class, and I'll do a demo on how to do this. It's really a fascinating technique. Opens up doors for lots of new things. There's a small piece down there in the display that I made several years ago, and we can definitely be doing some of that. I'd be happy to demonstrate. I guess the new thing since April is this one, which I've had a lot of comment on, and it's a case of getting the epoxy, cutting the grooves again on a table saw, on a jig, and then putting the epoxy in and letting it set and then turning. And I'm pretty sure you can see the color all the way through that. Very nice effect, and using a pretty small amount of epoxy. This is one that I will be doing. This is how I cut the grooves on the table saw. And this time I put them, instead of being straight, I put them at an angle, and also an angle this way. This is the mold for it. I'll just fill this 2/3 of the way up with some epoxy. I think I'll use red epoxy. And then I just set this in this with a little bit of weight on it so it won't float. And wait for a couple days and it'll be ready to turn. I'll turn away the excess wood on the back, so I'll have a rim like that where the epoxy, the light will come all the way through the epoxy. What else do I have here? I guess, this is for a piece like this, this is how I make the mold. It's just some MDF, and I pour it in, put a waste block on the back or a faceplate, and then turn it down to the size that I want. But you can see that I haven't done anything with this, and this is the way after it dries. That's how clear it is. It gets scratched when you start sanding it. And when I was talking about making something out of epoxy in April, I said it involves a lot of sanding. There are some shortcuts. You really have to start with 80 or 100 grit and work your way all the way up to 12,000. So you've got to be patient with your sanding, but it's well worth it. This was the next one I did. I did that a couple months ago in Vermont, and I took that up to, I think, 1,200 on the sanding. I'll pass this one around.
Is that a wet sand?
Yes. Yep. I'll get to that later. But yes, dry sanding up to 400 or 600, and then I go to a wet sand. And I always use, when I can, I use Abernet, because you can clean Abernet. You can't clean when a piece of sandpaper gets epoxy in it, you throw it away and get another one. But yes, definitely wet sanding. Those are not bubbles, by the way. I was talking about them earlier. It's just discoloration in the burl grain. So that one came out pretty well. I cheated a little because I sprayed some epoxy, some clear acrylic Anyway, a spray, so I could take a picture of it and send it to Dave for the newsletter. This stuff here. So what I plan to do is go back. I will sand off the acrylic, although it doesn't look bad the way it is. Somebody already offered to buy it. Probably I should just sell it and move on. I'll talk about resources in just a second on the internet. Some people will not use any sanding sealer. They will go all the way through the grits and then go to the buffing wheel, and from the Tripoli to the White Diamond to the Carnauba, and not put anything on it. This has no finish on it at all. This is just sanding and buffing. Some people will use sanding sealer. This one I used some acrylic on it. The burl turned out to have a lot of voids and some cracks and some punkiness, so I don't really regard this as a finished piece. I only sprayed it so you could get a little better idea of the color involved. But it just shows the potential of combining the epoxy with the wood. There are a million colors out there and a million chunks of wood that you can combine it with. I always talk about YouTube as a resource. All of these are YouTube channels. It is a wonderful resource, and I'm sure all of you waste a lot of time looking at wood turning videos. For the sphere, these are 3 that will give you a good overview of how to turn a sphere. These are all just solid wood ones using 3 different techniques. I'll talk about the technique I'm going to use tonight is a combination of this guy and this guy here. And that's another demo that we'll do later in the year, is turning spheres, because it's a fun thing. And it isn't difficult, but there's definitely a right and a wrong way to do it. And if you do it the wrong way, you keep trying to make it round, and you might have started with one this big, and you end up with one this big if you don't do it right. So, and if you watch any one of these demos, you'll get a sense of how to approach it so you don't waste all your wood. The resin sphere is what we're going to do tonight. And this guy is kind of the leader on the internet. His name is Heath Knuckles. I don't know if that's his real name. These guys also have some. But Heath Knuckles, if you put his name in on the search window on YouTube, you'll find one very similar to this one here, although his came out a little better than my first one did. Really spectacular. It's so stunning that when you look at it, you immediately say that that's something you want to try. So I did. I talked to you about my resin table. We don't need to cover that again. Okay, turning a sphere. This is one technique where you can prep. You start off with a cylinder almost always. So you put the cylinder between centers and prep it. Okay, the center is here, and you're going to be turning. Basically, if you cut a slice through it, you'd be turning an octagon. So that's what I did. I prepped my piece. It's kind of like the relationship that you have with circles, with pi and pi times the diameter and those different formulas. There's one for octagons too. In my case, I've got a 3 3/4 inch cylinder that I started with. You multiply that by 0.414, and that gives you the dimension of each face of the octagon going around. And doesn't matter whether you have a 3-inch circle or a 10-inch circle, that will never change. So that's very helpful in doing the layout. And let me get set up here. Well, this is the piece that I prepped for tonight. And the reason I did this prepping was this would have made shavings all over the place. As I said, they're full of static electricity. It would have made a mess. So I'm going to start with it at this point. But this is how I did that. So you see this corresponds to this surface, this to this, etc. And that's a formula that won't ever change. Any questions? I think I've covered everything I had over here. Any questions up to that point? Frank, do you have a small cone center? That's one thing I didn't bring. I got the live center, which I can use. Which I will. This is a cup center, which I'll be using later. It's good to get your piece as far away from the chuck and the tailstock as you can, because you're going to be getting your tool down in there. Now, as you check out different videos that have anything to do with turning resin, you're going to get a lot of opinion as to what the best tool is to use. For those of you who have tried it, you know how difficult it is. If you have the tool held right, you make these beautiful, very light, almost floating shavings. If you don't have the tool held right, you make a lot of little chips that look like little teeny pieces of glass. Easy Wood, which is a name that probably many of you are familiar with, they sell a line of carbide. I don't know if they have other tools. I'm not familiar with those. That they are really marketing carbide turning tools for people who are experimenting with resin. And I bought a set, and I'm still undecided about carbide versus just a good edge on a negative rake scraper. So I'm sticking with the older tools for now, that I'm having a little bit better luck. What I'm gonna do is use a spindle gouge, a bowl gouge, and then a negative rake scraper, and I'm gonna bring this down to where it's nearly a ball, and then I'm gonna switch to another blank that I made to show you some of the technique for sanding. So, but this is the part that is not about resin. It's about making a round ball on a lathe that happens to have resin in it. As always, use your face mask. Another thing, I won't be doing a whole lot of sanding, but this stuff is not good to breathe. So try to do it in a well-ventilated space, and always use a dust mask. So my primary tools, I've got a bottom feeder, a bowl gouge, and a negative rake scraper. And I should be able to turn this into a fairly reasonable spear with these three tools. So we'll get started. So we've got an octagon right now. Am I echoing a lot with my face shield? Is that okay? Right now we've got an octagon, and we're going to turn it into a ball. That's the sound you're supposed to hear, which really is no sound at all. You heard that little scrape? That's not the sound you want to hear. This epoxy resin does turn nicely though. I don't know about what the camera view is. Can you see the tool? Is there an overhead camera? Well, my contact point is the usual sweet spot when you're turning a bowl, right up in this area here. And as I said, you want to get the angle just right. Of course, now I'm just turning wood and I'm not in epoxy. So we've gone from an octagon. We're starting to go down to a ball. I'm going to reduce the size of the tenons out here on the ends and get my move my tool rest around a little bit. Turn the lathe off. I didn't get the calipers out, but if I'd done that, the dimension on the top face of the octagon would have been the same as this dimension here, and also the diameter of these here. And so now I'm beyond that point. I don't need those measurements anymore. I'm going to turn these down, and then we'll be closer to being a sphere. The dimension from this point to this point was exactly the same as the diameter. One of the resource guys, the Wyoming wood turner, well, I can't remember his name. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen some of his videos. He uses a template like this, which is and I will use it a little bit. And all it is a guide. You're obviously not going to make your sphere exactly this diameter. It's going to be a little bit smaller. So this template is really only relevant right at the beginning, and it allows you to see we're already pretty good. I mean, I have my curve fairly close to what I'm going to end up with. So this is only good at the beginning, and if you're starting off, if you don't use the octagon method, the guy Heath Knuckles starts off with a big cube of resin, and so I believe he uses one of these, and he takes it, and the shavings are all over his shop. It's really kind of amusing to watch. He will use one of these. It's not essential. It's just a kind of an eyeball thing. It is helpful. Okay, so I'm going to reduce these tenons just a little bit. I'll leave it at that for now, and then I'll make them a little smaller when I get ready to part it off. If your tool is sharp and you're holding it right, there should be almost no sound. Unlike with wood, where you will hear a little bit of noise from the tool, this is virtually silent. That grating sound you heard means that I was making a few chips, but they were very small ones. All right, at this point, I'm going to go to my negative rake scraper, and I'm going to proceed. Excuse me, I want to have a good firm grip on the tool rest. Now that's a nice smooth cut. There's no chattering. Now I'm going to leave that pencil mark in the center, and I'll show you why in a second. If you go over to the table and back, if you're buying something, that's where you'll be cashing out. You'll see a gigantic block of resin that they cast, and Dave is going to give that to me when I come back in the fall and wants me to turn something. I haven't decided. It will not be a ball. It's going to be something a little more artistic. So I'm going to be looking at shapes, but it'll be by far the largest piece of resin that I've ever worked with. So I'll take a few pictures. I don't think I'll do a demo, but we'll see what I can come up with. He's curious to see what we can do. Again, they're really interested in marketing their resins to wood turners. So I encourage you to play around with this and see what you can come up with. The thing that he's curious about is that he's got this block that's 10 or 12 inches on a side. No, I guess it's round. He's curious to see if the color is consistent all the way through it. Tom, you were talking earlier about a piece that you've got where the little sparkly pieces were not consistent and wondering how to deal with that. That's important to them. So this really is in the form of research. So, if you're interested in doing a piece, talk to them, and they will make some available to you just to play around. They really do want to market this stuff to more wood turners outside of our club, obviously. They have a national presence, and so hopefully we can come up with some ideas. We're sort of the, what do they call them, the dummies, the test, yeah, crash test dummies for their resin. So they're very interested in your experiences. So don't hesitate to give it a try, see what you can come up with. Now I'm completely in wood, so you are going to hear a little bit of vibration. Have most of you converted from your traditional scrapers to the negative rake, finding that they definitely are less prone to catching, and you get a little bit smoother finish? I'm a real believer in them. If you haven't, we've talked about it a lot in meetings, and we can certainly do it more. And now I'm using just a regular spindle gouge, and that's only because it's got a narrow point and I can get down in there a little better. Now I'm going to use my bowl gouge and go out on the wing and use it as a scraper. Use my parting tool to get rid of some of that debris here. You do have to periodically pull all this stuff away. Keep an air compressor nozzle handy when you're working on this stuff, and just blow it out of the way. Okay, I'm back to my regular spindle gouge. That's really what you want to be hearing, and that's nothing. Means you're getting a fairly smooth cut. It will definitely tell you if you're starting to get chatter and making little chips. I hope I don't show that to you. Okay, I'll turn the speed around. Now I'm going to reduce the size of these tenons on the end, and then when I get down fairly small, I will cut them with a saw. I don't want to... when Joe sent out the announcement for this, he said, Russ is going to entertain and inform you. That's kind of an inside joke. I, for some reason, have a reputation of having things fly off the lathe when I'm doing a demo, so I'm really trying to not have this happen tonight. We wanted all information and no entertainment. I'm taking my spindle gouge, turning it over, and going to use it as a shear scraper, just to get that little bit off in there. All right, I'm pretty close to a sphere already. All right, I'm not going to press my luck. All right, that's the end of stage one. Now I'm switching to cup centers, which you're probably all familiar with. You can buy them, but you can just as easily make them. And what I did to make mine, use a soft wood so it doesn't make impressions in your piece. And I usually use basswood, but I think that's what I have here. And then you can buy them that have nylon pads on the end, but the problem, they're good for sanding, but they don't hold the piece really firmly. There's a little bit of play when they come in contact with the foam, and what happens is when you put a tool to it, the piece moves very slightly. So I think if you're going to try this, make your own. It's so simple. Just take a face plate and turn it. The size is really not too important. You're really making contact. It does not have to conform to the radius of the ball that you're turning. That's not important. What's important is having all of these surfaces be running true. So just once you get it hollowed out, just touch your tool on here. That way you're getting nice even contact all the way around on the contact point. And then I just took some foam. It's the same foam that I use to line the drum for my vacuum chuck, and it won't hold up very long. I'll have to keep replacing it. But it holds it firmly, but it doesn't mar the surface. So you can see that this is my original diameter here, because it's still got the pencil line on it. So the way we bring this into true is we turn this so the axis is running with the bed of the lathe, and tighten it fairly snugly. And when I turn this on, you're going to see a little bit of vibration. It isn't actually vibration. What it is, it's what they call ghost wood, and it's the difference in the diameters. The diameter this way will be different from the diameter this way, and the objective is to bring those two together. So hopefully, if this goes the way it's supposed to, I will bring those two diameters, and then we'll have. I'm not going to be removing this pencil line. I'm going to be bringing the rest of the wood on the ball and the resin into the same plane as the pencil line. And I will do this 2 or 3 times, and hopefully that will produce a perfect sphere. It's amazing how this works. I said earlier that if you try to do it using one of these and keep putting it on it, you're going to be chasing it, and you'll never get it exactly true. So when you practice it, just use this at the beginning and then go to this system here. All 3 of these people talk about using this technique of rotating the ball in the cup centers, and you just bring it in slowly. And sometimes you can do it in 2 or 3 changes of position. Sometimes it takes a little more. And I've had such good luck with my negative rake scraper that I'm going to try that again. You definitely want to have a firm, the tool firmly on the tool rest. Lift the handle up slightly so you're giving every advantage you can to the tool. There are several theories about why a negative rake scraper is less prone to catching, and I think the consensus is that with a regular scraper, if you only have one grind on it, it's easy to catch, and the way to reduce the chances is to lift the handle up. You've all discovered that. What this does, it's sort of like lifting the handle up by still keeping it straight. And then if you need to, you can lift the handle up slightly to reduce the aggressiveness of the cut. And I believe that's the official explanation of why this works. Some traditional turners really still don't like this, and I'm a firm believer in it. I think in most cases it gives great results. Okay, so we got quite a bit of ghost wood tonight, so I'm going to try to bring that in slowly. And I've experimented with different speeds, and I haven't come up to any conclusion. You definitely want it fast enough, but if you go too fast, you're likely to make chips. That was not a good sound. I'm going to go back to a gouge on this. Chair's moving away from the lathe. Actually, just by tightening my hand wheel, I reduced a lot of that vibration. I think that was the problem. I can still feel a little bit of vibration in the handle of the tool. You can probably hear it. But we're close. I don't know if you can see it, but here's my pencil line. Actually, the ball is rotated a little bit. I've removed just a little bit of it. As I said earlier, the idea is to turn everything except the pencil line away, and I'm fairly close to that. So what I'm going to do is put another pencil line on it, or Sharpie if you don't have a pencil. So my new pencil line is here, and I'm going to turn the sphere so that pencil line is running with the bed of the lathe. Not too bad. That's about what you would get on the second rotation. The whole idea of ghostwood is sort of an interesting concept. It's wood that both is and isn't there, because you have two different diameters that are turning here. You have the fat one and the skinny one, and the ghostwood is the difference between the two. And when you get into doing more multi-axis turning, you'll see that if you go to and watch some videos, you'll hear the term a lot more. Barbara Dill is one of the national leaders on doing multi-axis turning, and she uses that term a lot, as do many others. But if you go to Pinterest and just put in multi-axis candlesticks, you'll come up with incredible shapes, and it's all using the same principle of controlling the ghostwood. All right, I can feel on this outer part, my tool is really not vibrating much. I don't know if you can look across it and see any movement. I see just a little bit. Boy, that's looking pretty round. I'll do one more, and then I'm going to switch to another one that I prepped, and I'll talk about how to sand. Doesn't that sound exciting? So at this point, I've got less than half of the ghost wood that I had before. So, I mean, that I'm bringing it in, each time I do this, I'm bringing it in closer to being a almost perfect sphere. And you don't have to turn it 90 degrees each time. You can turn it 45 degrees. How are we doing on time? Still plenty of time, don't we? I don't know if I can talk for a whole nother hour. I know you don't want to watch me sand for an hour. All right, we're very close. I've got some pencil line showing here, a little bit here. I'll do one more. Actually, I'll put it in at an angle just to see what happens. That's more vibration than I really wanted to see. So that tells me that I'm still out a few thousandths. All right, I guess there's no reason I can't sand this one. I had prepped two others, but I don't think I brought them any closer than I have with this one. So the next step is to start, and you really do have to start with a fairly low grit, either 80 or 100, because you've got a lot of ridges here, and if you kept working at it, you'd make it a little bit smoother, but not enough to avoid those coarser grits. So I'll start, and I'll go partway through the sanding process, but it's really boring to watch somebody sand. So I'll really just talk a little bit about it, and then I'll show you my shortcut method to making the figure of the wood show through. It won't be a finished piece. I'll have to go home and put it on my buffing wheel and maybe sand it a little bit more. But we'll at least be able to make it, you'll be able to see the figure in the wood on the inside. At this point, it's very important to have the foam. One guy in one video said just take some very thin strips of leather, anything at all, so your cup, the wooden part of your cup is not making contact with your piece, because you will start marring that surface a little bit. Okay, I guess the coarsest one I brought is 120, so that's where we'll start. And as I said, with this epoxy, this is very important. And I'm still, I don't know if I'm so muffled you can't hear. I'm still practicing, still experimenting, I should say, with different speeds for sanding. I'm not sure if it's better with a sphere to go faster or slower, so it's going to be somewhere in between. That's really running quite true. There's hardly any ghost wood left. So I will be switching between forward and reverse, because if I try to switch my drill to reverse, the pad screws itself off. So. So my drill is still spinning this way, and the workpiece is spinning the other way. So you're just doubling the sanding action. If they were going in the same direction, you wouldn't get as much sanding. So while it's still in reverse, because you can still see a little bit of movement, it means that I haven't gotten my two diameters exactly the same, but I think it's so close that I'm not, if I try to make it any better, I probably will make it worse. So now it's just a case of working I'll use this one just a little bit more, and then I'll start working up through the grits. All right, I think my next one is 180.
that just like a quarter of an inch or half inch every time?
You mean when I rotate the piece? No, I'm going more like 90 degrees. But it really doesn't matter. You need to get all surfaces. The important thing is that when you back off the piece, the parts that were up close to the end here, you need to expose those. So rotate it at least a quarter of the way around, if not a half. You can see it vibrating, and I think now the cause is that some of my foam has moved a little bit, so when I'm grabbing it, I'm not grabbing it exactly centered. All right, I'll jump up to 220. I want to get up to a point where I'll start wet sanding, and then I'll put a little bit of my acrylic spray on, and you should be able to look right into the middle of the ball. Yeah, it was pretty boring. We went to this meeting the other night and we just watched a guy sand. All right, I'm jumping up to 320. I'll go to 600 and do a little wet sanding. I will have to go back to this later. Now, when I switch to wet sandpaper, and spray it a little bit, you'll definitely see it starting to jump out. I don't know if the camera's picking up on that. Can you see you're starting to be able to look in it, into the core of the piece? when they do a river table here at Advantage, they sand to, I think 220, and that's all. And the reason they don't have to, the reason they don't have to go any higher is because the coating that they put on the top will fill in those all those little scratch marks, and you won't ever see them. And it's a beautiful finish that they get. That's what I'll do with my acrylic, and I'll spray it, even though I'm going to go back, sand it a little more when I get home to finish the piece, because I think it's coming out quite nicely. But that'll show you the grain. Okay, one more grit. 2 minutes and I'll be done. This is 1200. You can see I've got a little bit of an impression here from the cup center, so I do have more sanding to do on this, but it's fairly round now. Couple of tips about sanding. You can go online and you can get sanding grit up into the thousands, as you know. I don't know if I brought a kit in. They're little, they're little pads, and these, they're all color coded. I'm pretty sure I got this on good old Amazon. And these pads go all the way up to 12,000, and because they're color coded, they have grit on both sides. I'll just pass I'll pass the 12,000 grit around, and you can see how fine that is. And these will be all for wet sanding when you get to that point. But it's, as I said at the April meeting, it's very laborious, and you sand and you sand and you sand. So a little shortcut is to take some acrylic, if you want to see what it looks like right away. And the blue one that I had, maybe I passed it around. Just spray it. We'll give it a second, and I'll pass it around. And you can do a lot with your buffing system. Many of you have the Beal buffing system. Just one little bit of warning. You know what a heartbreaker it can be when you press a little too hard on one of those wheels and your piece goes across the room. I always put an old quilt or something on the bed of the lathe, so if it pulls something out of my hand, and it's hard to hang on to a little sphere like that, at least it hits a quilt first, and you've got a fighting chance of saving it before it hits something really hard and takes a chip out of it. But I've had some real heartbreakers, so definitely keep padding on the bed of your lathe, and just keep a good grip on your piece, and be careful about how you approach the wheel. If you get like the rim of a bowl too close to that wheel, it's going to snap it away from you so fast. You probably all had it happen, hopefully only once. And it's the same thing with when you're doing a sphere like this. You got to hang on to it, and you go from, I don't know what the grits are of the Tripoli and the, that's another thing I wanted to mention. We talked about it at a meeting back in the springtime, and Frank made up his own Tripoli. I don't know if any of you took it and experimented with it. It was diatomaceous earth and what else? Mineral oil, Frank? Anyway, he made up some of his own. So there are polishing compounds. I don't know if I brought, this is stuff, you go to a auto parts store. I think one of these guys, Heath Knuckles, uses this stuff. And at some point in the grit, I don't know how far up he was, 6,000 or 8,000, he put a coat of this stuff on. This is for getting little scratches out of your plastic headlight covers. So there are many, many products out there. They may not be oriented toward wood turners, but give it a try, because if you're trying to do this without spraying it and taking a shortcut, you really have to be good with that and patient with the sanding. It's really the only negative. I think the opportunities are just limitless, just from the few things that I made here. Give it a try. We've got a good source of supply here, and do your own experimenting, whether you want to make a ball or just add it to a wood piece that you've already made. Any other questions? Major? No, not yet. I've been saving them. When I'm turning resin only without any wood, I do save those shavings because they're a nice color, but I haven't incorporated them into a new piece yet.
Is there anything that will
Dissolve it? Acetone. Yeah. But you could take the shavings if they're really bright color. They're not going to be. They're going to be a very pale color when they come off the piece. You could do it same idea as this, taking those colored shavings and putting it into more resin and incorporating it into a design that way. But I haven't done it yet. I do have a lot of bags of resin shavings sitting around, taking up space in my shop. Some pink ivory? Whoa. That's it. Yeah, I know it. I did that once. I never threw it away. You can't pay $50 for a piece of wood like this. You're going to save every bit of dust. Okay, as soon as this is dry, I'll pass it around, or if it's not dry, come up and look. But you can see what potential it has for, I'll hold it up. This is very similar to one of the ones that this guy Heath Knuckles did. So give it a try, see what you can do with it. And we'll definitely have some classes on this going into the fall. We'll do classes on turning a sphere first, and then turning a sphere with both wood and resin, or solid resin for that matter. So is that it? I guess we have. Thank you very much. Did we sell all our tickets? Yes, we did. Okay, here he is, our raffle master.